It created a huge scandal when William, who was the husband of Elizabeth Windsor, William had an affair with this Agnes Rice. He actually brought Agnes to live in his house, kicked his wife out, and at his death, he gave most of his land and his property to Agnes, which resulted in years of litigation and contesting the will because Elizabeth's son, their heir, Charles, their legitimate heir, would have been Anne Windsor's grandson. They had quarreled bitterly. Charles had called his father a false hypocrite who belonged in prison. So it turned into a big mess contesting this land, and it cost a lot of money on both sides. And William and Agnes had one daughter who was illegitimate, also called Agnes. So sadly, that is what Anne Windsor's daughter, Elizabeth, is most known for. So Anne marries Edmund in 1494. It's interesting that they didn't have any children for 6 years. It's possible that at the time Edmund was building up his career. Maybe they weren't living together. I can't find any records of what was happening during that time. So if you know of any, please leave a comment. I would love to know. But they did have little Elizabeth in 1500, and Anne died shortly thereafter. The thing is, I'm not sure how she died, if she died in childbirth. I think that she probably didn't die directly in childbirth because there's that record of her father-in-law, John, calling her daughter his little Elizabeth. John had died, and in his will, he left the gold chain to Anne, implying that she was still alive at the time that he died. So he had enough time to meet Elizabeth and call her his little Elizabeth, and then leave the gold to Anne in his will. So I think she probably hadn't died directly in childbirth, but at the same time, after Edmund Dudley remarried, there's records of his second wife at the time saying that she was worried she would go the way of Edmund's first wife when she was pregnant. So maybe Anne had something happen like what happened with Jane Seymour, where she was well and then things took a turn, or maybe she just got sick and her body was still quite weak, recovering from childbirth. It can take a while. And maybe she wasn't fully healed yet. And that's how she died. But either way, she died in 1500, had a pretty grand funeral that all the local gentry, all the important people showed up in a church where her father-in-law had donated altar cloth for his funeral when he had died as well. So there you go. That's Anne Windsor. She died about 21. Not a lot to say about her, but she's one of these people who was skirting around on the outside of power, yet she would have seen a lot. She would have seen her father surviving the Wars of the Roses, being stripped of honors and then re-given the honors, and then her stepfather being quite close to the new king. It was an interesting life that she lived for the short amount of time that she lived it. So there you go, a little bit about Anne Windsor, a person that I did not know existed, but I feel like my life is a little bit fuller now that I do know of her existence.